Hello there. I'm Shelley Francis. I'm here today with Janna Moll, and I see a lot of our visitors, our attendees starting to come in. We're just gonna let everybody start to show up for a few minutes. If you'd like to use the chat screen to tell us where you're coming in from, that would be fun to see. We are gonna be here for 90 minutes in conversation today. My name is Shelley Francis, and I'm your host. I'm the founder of Creative Courage Press, and I'm Janna's publishing partner for a book that we're working on together about the science and soul of energy medicine. And I wanted to say thank you to Ann Sieg and Sue Hovland's networking group who invited us to do this call today, and all of you who are starting to join in. If you don't know her yet, Janna Moll is the founder of Energy Medicine Specialists, or EMS, which is a center for excellence and ethics in healing, education, and practice in the field of energy medicine. Janna's goal with EMS is to educate and support the most highly trained and ethical practitioners in the field of energy medicine. So welcome, Janna, and welcome.
Thank you.
Great.
And hi to Sue's group.
Thank you for everybody to be here. Just some housekeeping to begin with. We are going to have a chance to ask questions of Janna at the end using the Q&A or the chat buttons at the bottom of your screen. Janna's going to introduce the topic for a few minutes, about 15 minutes, and then she'll lead us in a meditation. After that, she'll ask one or two people to raise their hands and volunteer to share their personal story so that we can have some real live examples of how our inner worlds are reflected or are reflecting the outer world, so vice versa there. And then we'll make time at the end to answer some questions as well. So thanks for coming in. And today our topic then is seeking calm in chaos, clarity and perspective in how the world reflects us and we reflect the world. Janna, we are certainly in a time of chaos. So let's just jump in and start out by just saying, where are we right now?
Yeah. Wow. If I had the answer for that, I'd probably be extremely wealthy. We are in chaos. We are in the unknown. We are in the breakdown of structure. And I'm going to talk about all of that. But first, what I'd like to talk about is where we are at personally, where each of us is at personally. And I want to take you back to March of this year, maybe even January, when you started to become aware of this pandemic possibility. Started in Asia and started moving around the world. In March, actually before March, in February, flights were limited from Asia. People were stacked up in airports trying to get back home. Borders were being closed. By March, here in the US, businesses were being impacted. Travel was definitely being impacted. We were having trouble finding products. So what happened was we all suddenly, almost overnight, had to embrace this idea that we were vulnerable or being threatened by a world pandemic, meaning our health was questionable, our safety was questionable. So I want everybody to just internally kind of go back to March and take assessment on how you were feeling facing this. And my guess is, from my own experience, and you can let me know, of course, that you were scared, that you were unsure. Many didn't know what was going to happen with your work. Many people didn't know what was going to happen with your elderly relatives because they shut down nursing homes and care centers for good reason, because people were dying. Many people had schools shut down, so they suddenly had no childcare. Products were hard to find. If you're dependent on toilet paper and Kleenex and you can't find that, that's kind of desperate. I have a niece who has 7 kids, and they're in the service, the United States service, a branch of the service, and they purchase goods at the BX, the special store for servicemen and women. And she was limited to a gallon of milk a week and a loaf of bread, and she has 9 people in her family. That's a desperate situation. Plus, she was homeschooling 7 kids, finishing her degree, and her husband was locked on base because of an exposure. So these are the kinds of things that some of our families, some of our friends, some of us have had to deal with. And there is a lot of fear that gets triggered, a lot of insecurity. So I want you to think about what that felt like. And then if you come forward in time to now, you may feel differently. Where do you feel more secure, more resolved? Do you feel hopeful, or have you kind of given up, surrendered to this is never going to be better, this is never going to change? Some people are doing very well unless they get hit with something. So the more you see in the news, the more you hear from a family member, the more, the closer it comes to you, the COVID comes to you in terms of people that you know, then that gets triggered all over again. Am I going to be able to survive? So some of us, well, I guess the big picture of what I'm trying to say is some of us have found ways of coping better than what we did in March, but it's still a fragile piece.
Right. And it's not just COVID. I mean, the COVID as a pandemic has made the world in a way feel smaller because we are all experiencing somewhat of the same thing at the same time. But there's other aspects to our the chaos and the uncertainty of this moment too, like politics and our election cycle.
Yes. Yep.
So why is it important to be aware of what's going on in the world? When you're going to talk to us about the symbology of what's happening both in the macro big world and in our personal lives.
I think it's easier to identify what's happening to you, how you're responding to things, how you're feeling about things, than it is to look at what's happening in the world and personalize that. You could do it from either perspective, but I think we tend to see what's happening to us first. And so to know that, to take some time and really notice that, is pretty important before we go to the grand view of how our challenges and our struggles are collective challenges and struggles, which is the macro, the big picture of what's happening in the world. We are more than just an event, a year, a community. We're also a country and a planet. We have lots of influences on how we bring ourselves to each day. And where we are barely coping is where we are stockpiling things to come up down the road. So it's really important that we stay present to how we're feeling, which is why I wanted to talk about this issue. The micro, what's happening in me? How am I feeling? It's really important to take assessment on that, on what you've gone through from March, because this year has a lot of influences on it. It has health influences, it has financial influences, it has governmental or political influences. There are educational influences. Are kids getting a good education now with this strange method of getting schooling, of learning? And, you know, not just at the elementary level, but look at what's happening with colleges, universities. We have influences astrologically that give us a pattern. If you believe in that, they give us a pattern for what the lessons are this year. what's happening at any given moment. If you bring your attention to how you're feeling, you may see more and more alignment with other events, but other influences as well. I mean, there was a period of time, I'm trying to remember exactly when it was, I think it was June, where the world shut down and said, Americans can't travel here. Yes, there was a shutdown in March, but it shut down even further after that when our numbers didn't come stabilized like everyone else's. We couldn't travel. And even Time magazine came out and said there are 7 places in the world where Americans can travel to. I mean, how does that feel? This is a country that's used to having freedom to travel the world. Not just the freedom, but the financial independence, the financial luxury, the vacation time. You know, some would argue they don't get vacation time, and, you know, it's a status thing as well, but that's a major freedom that got shut down. Yeah. And then there are other things happening too. You know, government rules are changing, laws are changing, things are being restricted, money's being shuffled back and forth from one place to another. How do you know what the influence for you is going to be?
Right. And then on the, you know, another complication or complexity that hit pretty much around, well, the time of George Floyd's murder and the uprisings and the awareness and the great awakening, so to speak, of the impacts of racism, from healthcare to policing, that has created another global level of awareness of how we're all connected as human beings, and
yeah.
Choice points, it feels like, that have felt like it's added to the chaos or the heightened awareness of a need to feel like we're participating somehow.
I find it interesting when an event has such a huge repercussion in the world. George Floyd's death did not just affect Americans. It was a global response. And when things like that happen, I see them as events that are awakenings. And I think in general, in a general sense, a large part of the population has been asleep at the wheel. Maybe since the intensity of the Vietnam War, that it's been going in a direction where we've been less and less involved in what happens in the world around us. We're less activism. We have less activism. We have less writing letters to the editors. You know, our newspapers have somewhat failed or gone online. We have this influx of fake news or bots churning out news items to try and excite us, but for the most part, we've become very asleep at the wheel. And these individual events that happen, global pandemic, shutting down borders, building walls, police aggression, large fires or hurricanes or weather events. These are things that tend to churn up each person in personal ways that helps us wake up. And I think that's what this year is about. It's important that we wake up and have our voices heard again. And the reason is because we are greater than each of us individually. And it's how we move from this great division that's been created in the country back to a place where we can speak as one voice. And that doesn't mean we all agree on things. It means that we speak with a larger perspective of our place in the world.
Mm-hmm. So how can we reinforce our boundaries and our sense of groundedness and yet still stay part of the world and not just numb out or go back to sleep?
I think the easiest way to do that is to be very present in the moment. Spirit would say, be here now. Lots of people have said that, but that's the meaning of that is don't get too far ahead of yourself and don't drag your past into the present. So we have to heal the stuff that we carry so that we can be fully present in this moment. When we're fully present, then we get to choose how we respond to something. It's not our emotions getting triggered by someone else's something. We're not, the statement that I like to refer to is, nothing is about you, but everything you personalize is your lesson. Nothing is about you, but everything you personalize is your lesson. So if we're getting churned up by other people's stuff, it's really not about us. If we're dragging our old wounds into the present moment, we have not addressed the lessons, and those things intensify. So how we bring this all to a place of better coping is to eliminate the stuff that is not about now, and to be here fully now. And that means if I wake up and I feel like I have no motivation today, I'm feeling depressed, I'm feeling under the weather, I'm feeling pressed down into my bed, I don't want to get up, I don't have a desire to do anything, I have no motivation, I need to recognize that. I don't need to fight through it and pretend I'm somewhere else. I need to honor myself for what I'm presenting, and give myself some compassion and space around that in whatever way I can. And then I don't carry that into tomorrow. It doesn't become a pattern. It's a moment. It's a day. It's an hour.
So that just reminds me of how much you talk about self-care, and the importance of being aware of the bigger picture and the smaller picture is a form of self-care.
Yeah. And cutting yourself some slack is definitely self-care. Saying it's okay if I'm not the life of the party today. I don't feel like it. That's okay. That's self-care.
Well, it's almost 20 after. What would you like to start us into the guided meditation, or is there some other background that we need to know before we go forward?
Well, I think I'll lead into the meditation, but I wanted to kind of talk about when I asked my husband this morning, what I said was, where are you at now in this year of COVID? I was kind of trying to get him to summarize what this process, March to October, has been for him. And he said, limiting, restrictive is how he would describe the time of COVID. And I said, because you can't travel? Because why? And he said, well, yeah, he said, choices are limited. So it feels restrictive. You can't go out, you can't do that, you can't eat out, you can't see people, you can't travel, that kind of thing. And then I said, well, is there more to it than that? And he said, well, and I said, so what have you done since you can't do other things? How would you describe what has happened in that period of time? And he said, focusing. He said, because some things have been stripped away, I found that I have the energy and time to focus on things that I need to get done. And he said, really, it's paradoxical. And I know you would love that word because you talk about paradox a lot. But I think that's one of the challenges that we have right now is it's not fully this and it's not fully that. And there is a lot of unknown about where we're at. So I'd like to lead a meditation so everybody can kind of get in touch with where they are in their own paradox this COVID year. Okay. So I'm going to ask everybody to settle into your chair. Focus on your breathing fresh breath in, bring in whatever energy is needed. On the exhale, let go of whatever you don't need to focus on at this moment. Bring yourself as fully present as you can to your breath in and your breath out. Allow the energy to expand with each in-breath, filling the space around you. Creating a safety net or a cocoon where you feel secure in this moment and present to your own energy. And anytime you can bring your focus back to your in-breath and your out-breath. And allow your energy to flow down from this area of your lungs and chest where you feel your breath coming in. And bring that awareness down into your belly. And down into your hips. And send your grounding cord deep into Mother Earth to tether your physical body in the here and now. And we call in our guides, angels, ancestors, and the masters from across time and space, that we may be nurtured and supported in our ability to be free to look at anything we need to look at in this moment. And now with your focus still on your breath in and breath out in the background, allow your mental self, your mind, to take you to how you felt in March when you heard about the restrictions, when the world around you was changing because of this potential to get sick and die with a virus that was moving across the planet. Think about all the conflicting information you were given. It's going away, we've got a handle on it, it's only 6 people. And maybe like me, and maybe most of you are here in Colorado, where we had a total shutdown of schools, bars, restaurants. Many businesses sent their people to work from home. The only people really that were out and about in March and April were emergency people, truck drivers, healthcare workers, daycare workers. How did you feel when you saw your world changing? Sorry about that. That's cement work at my house. They're not supposed to be doing that. And feel free to make some notes for yourself as you realize some of what you're feeling or sensing as you revisit this. And now as you come through the summer, when things started to relax, when you found a way of coping, when you made a new normal for yourself, what did you notice? How did you feel then? I don't know if I can mute. Life. And how are you feeling now? You got through the summer and the early fall. Things seemed to open up again. They talked about school going back. People were working in different ways. Some were going back to an actual physical location to work. For me, clients started coming back again to see me in person. I still can't go out and teach, but life has changed, but it's got a new normal of some kind. And then suddenly we start facing the contentiousness of an election. We have schools going back and not going back. We have universities starting up and shutting down. We have COVID numbers rising. How are you feeling now? And how is that coping serving you or missing the mark? In the big picture, can you identify the negatives and the positives of how you're coping in chaos? Overall, when you look at what is happening in your personal life, amongst your friends and family, your work environment, how well do you feel prepared for what's coming? And what do you think is going to happen in the short term, in the near future? And how do you feel about that? So again, bring your focus to your breath. Give yourself a pat on the back for surviving from March to April, or I'm sorry, to October. And even if you don't have all the answers and you don't feel totally secure, you have survived and you are coping. So that's to feel good about. And as you bring yourself fully back into the here and now, you may think about whether you have something you would like to discuss in the big picture here, in the group, what you would like to share about your patterns and coping, and then we can turn that into what it might look like in the macro.
So if anybody would like to volunteer to share over in the chat box, or I believe you can raise your hand over there under the attendees. Does anybody just type into the chat if you'd like to share your story. trying to. Oh, Yvonne, I see you raised your hand, so I'm going to click allow to talk. And you can turn on your video too, I believe. Yvonne, are you there?
Yes, I'm there.
Go ahead.
Hi, how are you? I don't see a box for my video, so
Okay.
sorry on
Thanks.
my screen. Um,
Well, go ahead. We'll just make you the on audio for now instead.
so oh, okay. Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, thank you so much for this.
Thanks
that
for
was a wonderful
volunteering,
mission.
Yvonne.
My husband and I returned from a trip overseas in March, actually March 8th. They had already implemented temperature checking and asking people questions when we were overseas, and we were quite surprised when we returned to the States that no one asked us anything at the airport, and we just breezed on through and came home. And so initially I kind of went into just hibernation, disbelief of what was going on, and I thought, okay, this is my time to just process the trip, unpack, do what I needed to do. And so I gave myself that space. And I'm now coming to October totally in confusion, more in confusion now than I was then. Um, I know what was happening, and initially we didn't have all the information. Things began to shut down. I lead a laughter yoga group for seniors, and that shut down after the first week upon my return. So that's kind of my story. I don't know if there's any other questions you have or if I'm being clear.
Well, when you say that you kind of jumped from March to October, and you said kind of, it sounded like you almost woke up in October and went, I'm really confused. Did it seem that sudden to you?
There was disbelief initially, and then with all of the events, with the world events occurring, that is when, and not knowing what to believe and not to believe, is when I became actually more confused than when I was returned home. I was pretty much in, I think, disbelief of the enormity of what was happening. I know in Europe they took it very seriously, here not so much. So I was, okay, so this is a virus. This is something we're going to get through. And then when things began to shut down, is when I began to take it seriously. We had enough toilet paper, but yes, there was a run on everything. And yes, so through the summer, initially, I would say for the first 2 or 3 months, I pretty much didn't do anything except eat and watch TV, essentially, read. Uh, but then I started doing exercise, back to exercise, back to moving more in July and August, and kind of waking up is, and then I think the George Floyd incident, um, horrific incident, just really, like you said, it was an awakening. It just woke me up to, yeah, exactly. And now I'm back to confusion, or in confusion as to what to believe. I've read where they say everybody should go back out uh, and do a herd immunity with young people, not with people that are vulnerable, but I'm in that vulnerable age too. So
How do you feel about the confusion? Confusion is usually conflicting information. How do you feel about that?
I feel that there isn't one person or anybody that I can trust the information of what we're being told. So I've lost trust. And I guess in some ways I've lost trust in myself.
In what way?
In a way of, I know for myself what I need to do, and I have many self-care techniques, and I've come back to them. And the more that I do them, the more I begin to listen to my inner voice. So I lost trust of my inner voice. I actually lost the ability to hear my inner voice, the truth of what was good for me, what was right for me.
You know, thank you for saying that. That loss of trust, and part of loss of trust is self-blame. And it may not be as blatant as this is all your fault, but it can be as subtle as if only I had known. And when someone is not telling us the truth, we go through periods where we want to believe them. This is a trauma response. It's a trauma response that we do what gets us through: TV, eating, waking, going to bed, hibernating. We do what gets us through. And then when we start to figure out what's actually happening, we start to blame. If only I had known, if only someone had told me. You know, I can trust myself. I know I have abilities to get myself through, but we give it up because of the unknown, because of that losing of faith or losing of trust. The fact that you're coming back into it now is an excellent survival mechanism on your part, and it indicates that you have actually processed some of the trauma. But I would question if part of this confusion is also anger.
Anger for the virus, or anger at myself for not recognizing?
Not anger at yourself. The first step is to self-blame. The next step is to speak truth to power.
Mm-hmm.
And I would suggest that maybe you and maybe many of us are angry. Angry that we weren't told the truth.
Yes.
Angry that behaviors were such that those that were in the in crowd were taken care of and the rest of us mean nothing.
Yes.
That kind of thing. Does that
Yes.
fit for you?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. Yes.
Okay. So I think this anger is really important that we each recognize. It's a healthier step in dealing with trauma than to isolate, hibernate, and self-blame. And those are probably steps that we've all been coming through since March, when we started to realize this isn't going to be over in 3 weeks.
Right.
This
Yeah.
isn't going to be over in 3 months. This isn't going to be over by the election.
Correct. Agreed.
So now we're starting to, now that we're woke, we're starting to demand accountability. We've demanded it of ourselves. And I think we can demand more. And that's that self-care and doing the things that we've learned and being authentic. And sometimes when we, hibernate, we're not so authentic with the people around us. We just can't be bothered. Talk to the hand.
Yes.
But I think we're moving in that right direction. So we really have to look at how we got here. And part of it is that we have feelings, we have experiences, we have expectations of the world around us and the people around us, especially those that are our leaders, that make decisions for us. We have expectations of them, and we haven't really put a lot of thought in that. We didn't recognize that our faith was misplaced until our trust was destroyed. And I don't want it to sound all black and white, because there are variations of this depending on your personal environment. I mean, starting out in March, April, May, I knew almost nobody with COVID, even June, July. Come August, September, now I'm knowing people directly that have been exposed to COVID or have been hospitalized or have lost family members, which is quite interesting to me because all of the push at the beginning was fear, 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 shut down, wipe down everything. Don't even bring in packages into your house. You're vulnerable, you're vulnerable. And yet most of us didn't know anybody unless you had a healthcare worker in the family. Right. Now that it's so widespread and the numbers are still climbing, we have to face this loss of trust in the social surroundings of us to keep us safe. It goes beyond that even. We aren't just losing faith in our leaders, our political leaders. We're losing faith in the post office, the educational system. We're losing faith in healthcare because they're wearing plastic bags for God's sakes at times, right? I mean, how can that be safe? You can't get a test. I mean, these are ways that our trust has been eroded on the macro, and it reflects what we were doing in the micro, which is first I have to deal with how I feel. I don't want to see it. I don't want to deal with it. Now it's gone on so long, I can't stay here. Now I have to deal with how I feel about this. What risks am I going to take? How often am I going to go out? Am I going to socialize outside with a few friends? Am I going to see my family members? Am I going to test before I do that? Am I going to wear a mask? So these are all personal things we've had to deal with. But if you step back into the micro and look at how our trust has been eroded, it has hit us in every area. It's hit us environmentally. It's hit us socially. It's hit us financially. It's hit us in healthcare, in education, everywhere. And this then becomes a global issue of waking up and demanding accountability from our social systems.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing.
I just have one other, if I may, or I don't want to take up. If
no,
there's
go
someone
ahead.
Else. So what do I do with the fear about the upcoming election and the division and how much each of us see the truth as it is for them, for themselves. I want to be kind to them. To me, it's obvious what has eroded and the trust and all that, and that there needs to be a change. But there's also the other camp that feels that everything is just great. And what do I do with that fear of what is happening to this country and to democracy?
Well, the first thing that we need to look at is truth with a capital T. And we have been force-fed false information for so long that it has fed right into this push to divide and conquer us. And so if we step it back to truth with a capital T, the first thing that stands out for me is everybody wants to be heard. And I think right now, not anybody feels heard. It is not great for the other side because they're allowing machine guns in the streets.
Yes.
Okay? I mean, the truth is no one feels heard. No one feels exceptionally safe right now. And this place of being divided does not give us a clear picture of the future where we'll feel comfortable. Not for them, not for us. And I'm going to lead this back to Shelley. When we were talking earlier, you asked a question about division and how do we see from the middle. Do you remember that question, or you want to ask that again?
Yeah, it was something that came across my inbox or a webinar or a book recently, that the more we stay in just in I'm missing the word, but just stuck in our own position on the, whether it feels like I'm going to stay here and I'm not going to listen to another person's opinion because this is what I believe. The more we stay at the edges of our own opinions or polarities, the polarization will stay that divided. So how and when do we know when to step back toward the other, to rebuild trust or love or even just empathy and compassion? Because I think love is it's going to take that, but we've got to start with empathy and compassion. But if we stay in our own bubble, the twain shall never meet. So how and when, like, do we wait till after the election till we know, or is it till after the inauguration? When do we know that it's time to start repairing versus that time where the revolt or the uprisings feels like productive action? What's the both and of it? And that's where I always love paradox, because it's the wholeness of it. We have to look at the hard realities of it.
It is both and. You need to be confident in your own self and in your own growth work. This time of stepping back and insulating and isolating, going within, is all about know thyself. It is the first gateway in the mystery school. Know thyself. You can't know the whole unless you know your part. So find out, who am I? Where do I get jealous? Where does my ego get a hold of me? Where do I live in fear? Where do I give up my power? Know what you are bringing to the table and preserve and take care of that. And then what you contribute to the whole is going to be the best that you have. And that's all any of us can hope for. At the same time, we are not an island. This month's blog is on friendship, and it kind of starts out that way, that it's not just us. We have to interact with the rest of the world. And when we look at our place in the greater picture, that macro picture, then what we see is that I have to find a way to be in there. I have to find a way to be a part of other things. And it may be in your small community, but it may extend to having a voice that has greater range. It's not about fighting for everything that you want. It's about seeing and creating what it is you need in your immediate environment. But this idea of being polar opposites, of being separated, is really just flavors of the whole. We all have different opinions. We all have different experiences. We all have different beliefs. And as we each grow, those shift and change. We don't hold as staunchly the same beliefs we did when we were 18, 19, 20. We change. And hopefully, we as a society can grow and change. There are a couple of things that sustain me, and this is to your question, Yvonne. There are a couple of things that sustain me in this time where we do not know what the next moment is going to bring. We cannot know. We cannot plan for the election. We cannot plan for inauguration. We do not know when the world's going to open up. We do not know when there will be a vaccine. Right now, we have to be here now. The other thing, so that's one, is don't get ahead of yourself, because we can't go there yet. We can only be in this moment now and bring our best self. The other thing that sustains me is back in December, actually January of 2016, when Trump was newly president and things were starting, the handwriting on the wall was starting to show up. You know, it was like it was written in invisible ink for some people, and then it started to manifest. And I was so overcome with defeatism as to the direction that our world was going in. It had already been a capitalist society for a long time, but it was becoming blatantly cruel. And that wasn't serving me, and it was leaving me very vulnerable and hopeless. And I remember the meditation I had where I kind of surrendered to the hopelessness, and I said to Spirit, I don't get it. You know, we've worked so hard to be better, to bring our better selves to the world, to raise the whole. What is going on here? And Spirit said to me, we've got this. I said, you cannot heal what hides in the darkness until it comes out into the light of day. We've got this. And I've had to I've had to rest on that many times in the last few years, trusting that this human part of me, even this human intuitive part of me, cannot see the big picture as effectively as I'd like to. I do not know all the options. I do not know all the repercussions of things. I do not know how karma, if you believe in karma, is actually going to play out for us to get from where we were to where I'd like us to be. But I trust Spirit when Spirit says, we've got this. And as the time has unfolded, I have seen where people have started waking up. People have started fighting for kindness over cruelty. People have started fighting for equality, not just financial equality, but racial equality and political equality and religious equality. There are important things happening that are greater than each of us because we each show up. And that to me is what will get us through to next summer, next fall, whenever this period is bookended by readily available vaccines and maybe even a different philosophy around healthcare, making sure everybody has access. So I hope that helped your dilemma there at the end there, Yvonne.
Thank you so very much. I got goosebumps when you shared we've got this, because that inspires and gives me hope. And
good.
When Spirit speaks.
Yep, it did me.
Yeah.
And I didn't think anything good could come out of that situation, but that was the greatest good.
Thank you both. Really,
yeah.
really appreciate this. Thanks.
So do we have one more that volunteered? Oh, you're muted.
Okay, so there is a chat message from Gabrielle who says, I went through the fear of emotions of first denial, then fear, feeling like a victim, then anger, grief, and finally making peace with the whole situation and being in the flow of what is happening around me.
So let me ask you, Gabby, how do you see your place in the world now? When you say you've made peace with it, there's a lot of chaos still happening around you. How do you make peace with that? Maybe we can't find her in there.
I can click on allow to talk if you want to.
There she is.
Just click your unmute button.
There you are.
Hey, Jenna.
How are you?
Good. Good. So, yeah, basically, I know at the end it will be all good. And everything will be better than it was before.
And what will you see as better? What kind of changes do you think? And they don't have to be exact. They could be examples of changes that you expect to be coming for us to align with better.
More kindness in the world. People will help each other again in communities, in the larger. Healthcare will change. People people will claim back their power over their own health. Not being, going to the doctor and the doctor gives them some medicine and the medicine will heal them. They understand they have to do something for themselves to heal.
Yeah. And I think that's the dream, that's the goal that we all hold for. And yet we also see the hurdles that are right before us. We have a Supreme Court that may be making political decisions instead of justice decisions, and they will be couched in justice for the law or the power brokers or the leaders, or those with the money, insurance companies, hospitals, whatever, but they may not be justice for the individual. And so we still have these things that could be happening around us. And it's good to have a vision of where you see us going so that we all have that support that we need around us. But how are you going to get through from here to there? Because there are still some major events going to probably challenge you.
I trust 100% in spirit. And as you said, spirit said, I got this. And sometimes things just have to break first before something new can come in.
Yeah. So you celebrate the process, even if it
Yes.
doesn't make you happy.
Yes.
Good for you. That's good self-care. That's real strength in self-care.
Yeah.
Do you have a network around you to support you?
Say that again, please.
Do you have a network of friends or family around you to support you when things get tough?
Yeah, my husband is around, so I have kids. I'm part of a few different groups with healers, so
Good.
there's a lot of support around.
Good, because when you mentioned community stronger, I actually see communities getting healthier too, and that's by involvement. So it sounds like you are committed to being involved in a community that can support you, and that's a real positive.
Yes, it is. I have more contact to healers than I had ever before. I always, before this pandemic, I felt pretty lonely.
So you actually engaged that. You actually went out and found groups.
Yes.
Good for you. Good for you.
Yeah, and it shifted my whole work situation. So
Yep.
I was paralyzed in the beginning, didn't know what to do.
In March or before the pandemic?
No, when the pandemic started and shut us down.
Okay, so you've made a lot of changes since March.
Yes, I did.
All right, well, we celebrate you, Gabby.
Thank you.
You're what we should all be doing. And unfortunately, we don't all feel we can. Everybody has a different level of energy. They have a different level of commitment. You were able to move out of certain situations.
It wasn't always easy, especially the grief about losing the freedom of traveling. We wanted to see my mom this year because she's not doing well. We had 3 attempts to travel to Germany. Didn't happen. So I finally made peace with it and said, okay, it's not meant to be right now. So it's okay.
So you do more talking by phone and computer?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, good. because that touching in with other people is important.
Yes, it is.
It's very important. I know you from before COVID, so I know that you've changed your life before this event to allow choices that have gotten you where you're at. And not everybody is quite there. I mean, you make it sound really easy, Gabby.
Oh no, it wasn't always easy, but now I'm at the...
I know it wasn't always easy.
Whatever happens around me, I feel like I'm the eye in the storm, so whatever happens, it will be fine.
All right, well, it's good philosophy, that and having people have your back.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for doing this, Janna.
Yeah. Okay, so we have about 30 minutes left, and I don't know if we have questions or if there are other aspects of macro. I mean, I'm happy to talk about individual macro events and how they might be reflecting what each of us is being challenged with, but I think I kind of gave general. So where do you want to go as participants here? You're muted. I see your lips going.
Okay, so feel free to put something in the chat if you have a question for Janna. One of the questions I have while we're waiting for other questions to pop up is how, oh, we already have a question. How does astrology line with what's going on right now?
Yeah, interestingly, I am not an expert in astrology, but I do listen to a couple of different weekly reviews of what's happening in astrology. And this entire year is quite phenomenal. If you know anything about Saturn return, and I can't tell you how many years it is, every 26 years or something like that, Saturn returns to where it was in your birth chart. And that's a real challenge point for each individual. Well, this year, Saturn returned to Washington, D.C. at the birth of our country, our democracy. And so that means that there's a lot of upheaval and reevaluation and chaos that occurs in that location. So Washington, D.C., which is the bed of our political situation and our national ideology for a great extent. In addition, there was in January, there was this formation of planets, Saturn, Pluto, and Mars, I think. The three planets kept lining up throughout the year. And they lined up in January over China, and they were then named the COVID clump. So when these three planets keep coming back around and they've hit every single planet in the astrology at various times since January this year, and the last time I think they get triggered is December 13th or something like that. So literally this year has been reflected in this COVID clump, these three planets that keep lining up. Recently, all this stuff has come out more recently. There's been a lot of chaos. There's been a lot of lies and misrepresentation of the truth. There's been a lot of, pardoning or firing people that you don't agree with in the government, all that kind of stuff. But recently what's been happening is the planets, and some of them are the COVID clump planets again, but they've been lining up in what's called Thor's hammer. So there's the head, the two planets have a square to each other. That's the head of the hammer. And then the arm of the hammer is the third planet. And that keeps changing, but it keeps coming through as Thor's hammer. So what Thor's hammer means is Thor's hammer in mythology, it belonged to Thor. Thor could control it, but it also had its own ideology, its own energy. And Thor could send his hammer out to do things like create justice here. And so this formation of planets and stars that are making up Thor's hammer, some of them are the head, which does the bashing. Some of them are the handle, which does the wielding. They are creating some of this upheaval that's been happening in the last couple of months. And this is really what has been breaking down this false illusion that everything's going to be okay. And we're all starting to recognize and starting to move into anger because our trust has been betrayed. We're starting to recognize that, oh, Russia's behind this. We were told Russia was behind it in January, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. But we didn't believe them. No collusion, no collusion. And we trusted it. How many of you sat down and read the Mueller report? I mean, there was collusion. It's only recently that we're starting to see that what we were told subtly is now hitting us over the head. And so these things that are happening in a macro line up with the astrology, which also hits every planet in our own chart, depending on where it was when we were born. So when Saturn squared Pluto in your birth chart, that is the issue that's going to come up again. For me, I don't know a lot about astrology to be able to, give you a micro course on it in this moment, but I can tell you for myself, I'm a Leo with 9 out of 12 planets in the second house, which is the house of ethics and values. So when I had to smile when Shelley was introducing me and saying that ethics is a big issue of mine and a focus of EMS. Absolutely it is. You can't have 9 planets there and pretend that it's something else like relationship or money or publishing. It's definitely the house that those planets are lined up in. And so some of what's been happening for me over this year are ethical questions around how do I prioritize my time? How do I surround myself with people that are trustworthy? So it all has some flavor of ethics. And that's because of where my planets fall. So, everybody's getting hit with Thor's hammer. Everybody's getting hit with the COVID clump. And it's coming around in different ways of expressing, which is why we see it across the board in education, politics, healthcare, environment, everything. It's a big year. Do some checking up on Anne, what's her last name? If you're interested in where I go for some really good astrological information, just shoot me an email and I'd be happy to give you that link.
I think it's Astrology Hub that you've followed.
Astrologyhub.com that's who does is that the astrologer?
Amanda Walsh is the host of that, and Anne Orderly is the one that you've shared with me.
Yep, she's good. And they've been doing it weekly since January because of the COVID clump, which is phenomenal that someone would put that much attention to what was happening each week based on astrology and world events. So I think, and they're probably backlogged, they're probably archived so that you can go back and listen to some. If you think this was a real tough month for me, go back and listen to some of those. Mm-hmm. They're good.
Well, thanks for that question, Gabby, that you added to the chat. One of the questions I also wanted to be sure we covered was how do we reinforce our personal boundaries when everything around us feels like chaos?
Part of the focus of this year of introspection has been to to know thyself. And I said that before, that it was in the mystery schools, you would be allowed into the first room. And in the first room, there were certain lessons, and you couldn't move from that into an inner sanctum until you had passed the challenges, the lessons. The first lesson was know thyself. And then I think the inner sanctum was know that you are God. I don't know, I haven't studied the mystery schools, but there was moving from the I to the all. And so you have to know yourself. So you have to know where you end and someone else begins. For empaths, this is a life lesson. You feel your world, so you tend to be more expanded in your energy field than other people. And so energy gets in before it hits your boundary. You also tend to give away too much if you're kind-hearted, or you're a caregiver, or you're a rescuer, heaven forbid. You're giving away more energy than you need to. So by monitoring yourself, what depletes me, what makes me feel replenished, make your own energetic quality a priority. That's through self-care, it's through saying no, it's through doing things that feed you and are fun for you. All of those things will help you know yourself and stay as present as possible to what's happening around you. That mantra rule thing that I said before about, I've lost it. Nothing is about you, and everything that triggers you is your lesson, something like that. That's a real important thing to keep kind of in your peripheral vision, so that if you're finding yourself getting triggered, go, oh, I'm personalizing something. And if there's a lot of chaos around you and you're not sure what to do about it, remind yourself that it's not about you unless you make it about you. So that's where what Gabby shared is really helpful about finding her own center, trusting spirit explicitly, knowing that that's where her stability point is, and she can always come back there to evaluate what's going on around her. And then also that perspective of things are going to have to break to be better. Things have to come out of the dark to shine a light on it. I mean, you got to take a light into the darkness to see what's really hiding there. And what you don't know can hurt you. And we're finding that out in a big way, that what we don't know has hurt us and what we don't know can hurt us. And so to be informed, to make sure that you're available in your community and to yourself so that you bring healing to those environments.
Thank you. One of the things that you told me when we were preparing for this is that sometimes the macro is where the clarity is because it's not in the micro. So is that what you're talking about when things, it's not about me? Or tell me more about the clarity in the macro.
It can go either way. You can focus on what's happening to me. How am I feeling? Which is why I did the meditation there. Because if we know what we've stepped through, we can then look at what happened in the world and see how it was being triggered, whether it's astrological or political events or not being able to travel. We can see very directly what that association is. But you can go the other way as well. If you're feeling like confused, Yvonne said that she was feeling really confused now, and I kind of boiled it down to anger and loss of trust. But if you're feeling confused and you're not sure why or what to do about it, go to the macro. What's happening in the world? Where is truth in the world? Where is kindness in the world? Where is oneness in the world? And if those things have been broken down, if they've been made wrong or they've been squashed, then it's no wonder that you're feeling confused, because those things are truth with a capital T. They're not just true for me, they're true for everybody. That those are the things that make us all feel good. People that hurt others. And so that's what we're seeing in the world, is we're seeing this pattern of nobody's feeling heard, everybody's feeling powerless. And so they're trying to exercise this false sense of power over other people. And so it's kneeling to the neck. It's taking away your Social Security. It's, taking away your coverage for pre-existing conditions. It's how we hurt other people when we feel hurt. And it always boils down to power, which even revenge is a type of fight for power. So if we look at the world and we see where it's being broken down, then we can say, oh, okay, how do I feel about that? Is it reflecting in my personal life? Is it in my relationship with my partner, my spouse? Is it happening with my kids? Is it happening at work? Am I questioning my own healthcare? Am I having to make decisions about that? Do I feel powerless in some part of my life? So we can look personally at our lives, or we can look macro at what's happening in the world, and both will give us information. The micro tells us, oh, this is being churned up for everybody because it's happening on a grand scale. Or we look at what's going on in the world and we go, oh, I'm doing my own piece of this work.
You're asking so many questions. It's like, wow, you could spend all day journaling trying to figure out where you are, or having conversations with other people. What are
well,
some of the
that's why
practices?
it's been going on since March. Truth be told, this isn't an overnight process.
No, there's no quick fixes to it, but I'm curious how you work. I think a lot of our listeners are practitioners, energy healers. What are some of the ways that they can work with their clients around seeing the symbology at the macro or micro level?
Where I started to learn this was very directly out of my practice. When someone came with a health condition, which my background is not healthcare, so this was a new arena for me. I didn't have intuition or education to fall on. I needed to gather information to understand. So I had a PDR, which is a physician's desk reference, which tells you about medications. There's also a nursing one. And I had a medical dictionary. And I'm so clear on my scope of practice that what I am trained to do is to look at the energetics. I am not here to diagnose or treat physically, or any condition or diagnosis that you have from a healthcare practitioner. That's not my scope of practice. My scope of practice is what's happening energetically. So when I pick up a PDR and a medical dictionary, and my client says, I have AML, which is a type of leukemia, and I have no idea what that is, I go to the medical dictionary and I read what is happening in the body. What are the symptoms? What does the body exhibit? And I immediately know what's happening energetically, because it's symbolic. It's symbolic. If the blood, which is life force, is in some way not functioning, then your life force is off. Life force also sits in root chakra, which is family of origin. So my knowledge of the energy systems help me translate what's going on in the world into symbolic patterns. And that's where I feel like I can be really helpful as a practitioner, because I can help someone step beyond the symptom, the feeling, the event, and see its deeper purpose. I believe that everything is symbolic. I believe our physical body is symbolic. And when we can step back into the symbology of what's happening, whether it's micro, macro, energetic, it doesn't matter. It's going to give you a level of information that will guide you forward in whatever way you're currently ready to work.
I'm wondering if you have an example of a client that, without revealing privacy information, that describes more of the symbology of what's going on, and then how would you treat that?
Do I have an example? It's so tough because there are so many different cases that are so many different ways of being symbolic. I recently did a long distance surgery on a 10-year-old boy who had a birth defect with the blood vessels in his brain that caused him to have an aneurysm type stroke. Luckily, he was at home and his parents got it right away. They got him into the doctor right away. They were able to, what did they do? They did, they went up through a catheter. They do that to look at the heart, but they went up into the brain to see if they could cauterize the blood vessels that were bleeding. They were causing pressure on his brain, and they couldn't do it that way. So they scheduled him for surgery. And I did the long distance surgery. So when we look at that, number one, it's a birth defect. So that's root chakra. It's also blood, which is root chakra. It's also heart chakra, but it's root chakra. It's life force. I mean, they caught it at 10 years old. He could have been 15 and out running cross country or sailing or doing something that would have really totally threatened his life, maybe even taken his life. But the symbology of when it happened makes the lesson more important to recognize that this is a gift. And that's what I told his mom. You're so lucky this happened now. And so anyway, it's back of the brain, so it's near the brain stem, so it's how the brain functions and talks to the body. So what was happening was the left side of his body was weakened, even though it was just to the right side. Well, it's going to be backwards for you anyway, so it doesn't matter if I'm right or wrong, right or left. But it was affecting the right side of just right of the brainstem was affecting the left side of the body. And what they needed to do in surgery is go in and remove the hematoma, which was the pooled blood and tissue, and then reroute the blood vessels that needed to be untangled. They had created a mass. And so it's very symbolic of what's going on. Anything that's root chakra tends to involve the whole family. He's 10 years old. He's the only boy. Definitely a family issue. This is the second surgery I've done distance for this same boy. He's second born.
Quickly say, what do you mean by you do the surgery long distance? You're supporting the surgery long distance?
Yes, I'm doing energy work while he's in surgery. And because I've been through surgery with a lot of clients, I usually know exactly what's going on. Like she texted me, they've just come to get him. I go, yep, been on it for 5 minutes. I mean, I know when the focus of the doctors goes on him and I go, oh yeah, they're late. Oh, now they're focused on him. They're getting started. There are some things I'm not great on long distance, like knowing exactly when they quit, because sometimes the surgeon will be finished and someone else will finish up. And I'm not real clear who's still in there. If the surgeon is done, it feels done to me. So anyway, it's a long story, but so root chakra is family of origin. It's also life force. So his life was impacted by this. His vitality was impacted by this. And the relationships in the family, whether it's karmic or whether it's pattern of lesson or whatever it happens to be, are part of what's on the symbology. He's also second born in the family, which tells me he's bonded to mom. So there are some issues there with mom as caregiver, mom as the one who recognized that he was having serious issues and needed to get him in right away. There's something playing out mother-son in the relationship, but that's the kind of stuff I can talk to them about because that's what I do. And so that was part of the natural process of healing from this. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that's how I look at symbology. I'm not going in there and doing anything physically on him in his surgery. What I'm doing is monitoring the energy, holding intention, clearing the healthcare workers that are working with him, communicating with parents, communicating with him about what this step, opens up for him in terms of future expression. That's how I work, but it's based on the symbology of what the issues are. I mean, we're trained in the Healing Touch program, we're almost exclusively trained on chakras, which is the issues system, which is probably why I've gotten to be so good at symbology.
Well, we are at 2:25. I want to invite anybody who still has a question to throw it up in the chat, throw it in the chat box, or you still have time to raise your hand. Janna, was there anything else too around the symbology of macro, micro that you wanted to be sure that we shared today?
Yeah. There is a macro intention that we all engaged to be in a physical body on this physical planet at this time. And that's growth. So even those people who we see as diametrically opposed to the values we hold, the ones creating chaos, the ones not being kind, the ones creating division, the ones taking advantage or abusing people, even they are here for growth work. We don't grow when we're comfortable. We grow in discomfort, because when we're comfortable, there's no reason to change. We may have a desire here for more of, but we're not going to change the basic situation because we're happy. It's when we're not happy, when we're not content, we're not fulfilled, when we feel unheard, that we are willing to do growth work. And that's really the purpose we're all here. So we're all on the same page. It just looks different.
That's a good reminder, isn't it? To see both sides of the issue, all issues. Yeah. Well, I don't see any other questions.
Well, we either covered it all or I went off in so many tangents, they don't know what I said. I don't doubt that that is a possibility.
Well, one of the things, somebody just wrote, thank you.
Pam.
Go and help.
I really want to thank everybody for their interest in doing these. I mean, I'm happy to do this. This is early on. Carol Comator is a neighbor of mine, and everyone in Healing Touch will know her as the founder of Healing Touch for Animals and also a Healing Touch person. But one of the things that we started doing early on is we would get together and talk about some of these issues and challenge each other, because this is the fun stuff of what we do, I think, is looking at what could be the deeper meaning. Well, what if you looked at it from this way? Well, if I'm doing a technique and I do it for this purpose, but I change this, does the purpose change? So I'm constantly looking at different things like that and totally gassed by the fun of investigation. So I'm happy to do these calls, and I'm, you know, it kind of takes an audience, so I really appreciate people being interested. Hi, Cindy.
Thank you to everybody who's been here. We will be posting this on Janna's blog. If you want to go back through, you'll be able to listen to her meditation again there. And we'll be doing another live talk on October 29th to talk more about friendship as the frosting on the cake, and how can we check in about our friendships at a time like this.
And I'm really excited about that one, Shelley, because you and I are friends, and our friendship has deepened over the last COVID months, over the last year, and it's a fun topic. So I'm really looking forward to that one too. So all join us.
Yeah, so you can find the link under Janna's website, but we'll put it in the email too with this recording, because we'd love to have you back with us again.
And I know those of you that are in Anne's group, there's a half-hour debrief over on her Zoom call if you're interested in doing that. So thanks again, everybody.
All right, see you next time.
Kelly.
Bye.
Bye.